I moved into a new apartment shortly after graduating from college. My girlfriend moved in with me and we were both excited about starting a new life together. The apartment was big but empty with hardly any furniture in it, so we had to do a lot of shopping to fill it up with stuff. Being a couple of recent graduates with entry-level jobs, we had to look for the cheapest options for our new home. Antique shops and secondhand stores became our go-to places to look for furniture. One day we were looking through a second-hand carpentry store for a coffee table when a sign caught my girlfriend's eye. It was a paper sign placed over a small ornate cabinet, advertising an absurdly low price for it. I'm no craftsman, but even I could see the level of intricate detail that must have gone into carving the floral engravings on the cabinet. Even at a secondhand shop, it should have been able to easily fetch triple the price of what it was listed for. I asked the shop owner why it's so cheap, and he told me that it's kind of faulty. I asked him what he meant by that. He explained that the cabinet's key is missing, so that it's practically useless for anything other than being a decorative piece. My girlfriend tapped my shoulder and told me that she could probably pick the lock open if we bought it. As for why she knows how to pick locks, well, let's just say we both got mixed up in the wrong crowd during high school. We bought the ornate cabinet plus the wooden coffee table we were looking for from the shop. As I was carrying the cabinet to the back of the car, I was struck by how surprisingly heavy it was. Something seemed to rattle inside it too. I felt excited at the thought that something unknown might be inside it. It might even be some valuable treasure that we could sell for more than we bought the cabinet for. When we got home, I carried and placed the coffee table into the living room. My girlfriend immediately put the cabinet on top of the coffee table after I did. She spent the next hour or so trying to pick the lock with everything from hairpins to paper clips to the sound of a true crime documentary playing on the TV. Whoever made the lock for the cabinet did not want anyone to open it without the key. You'd think that would deter us from opening it, but all it did was want to make us open it even more. We reasoned that if someone had gone so far to make it unopenable without the correct key, then whatever was inside must be valuable, like jewels or antiques, or even stacks of paper cash. I suggested that we just bust open the cabinet several times, but my girlfriend pointed out that it might damage whatever was inside. And besides, it was still a nice cabinet. It'd be a shame to destroy it. Finally, my girlfriend was able to unlock the cabinet using a bobby pin and a sewing needle. She twisted the keyhole to open the cabinet, and we were finally able to see what was inside. We were mildly surprised to see that the cabinet was stuffed with hay. After scooping out a few handfuls of the hay, we found out what it was hiding. Under the hay that was presumably used to cushion it was a small, unopened bottle of what looked like red wine. The majority of the bottle was a clear green glass, but the neck of it was decorated by intricately etched silver. It had no label, but if the bottle was any indication, then it must be something pretty fancy. My girlfriend and I shared a smile. After an entire day of shopping for secondhand furniture and trying to pick a ridiculously secure lock, we were both feeling like we could use a stiff drink. I got a couple of wine glasses and my girlfriend popped open the bottle with a corkscrew. We immediately regretted the decision the moment we did. A rancid smell that was some sort of mix between cat urine and rotten fruit exploded into the air around us the moment the cork was removed from the bottle. I repressed the urge to gag. My girlfriend, who was the one holding the bottle, immediately set it down and went to the bathroom to vomit. I joined her there moments later. After voiding both our stomachs and calming down, we shared a self-deprecating laugh between us. It was a bottle of wine that had been locked inside a possibly century-old cabinet. We played a game of rock, paper, scissors to decide who had to go to the living room to empty the bottle, and, of course, I lost. I held my breath and pinched my nose with one hand as I grabbed the bottle by its base and went to the kitchen sink to empty its contents. The liquid that I had initially thought was red wine was black and viscous as it slowly rippled out of the bottle with an almost sludge-like consistency. Once I emptied the bottle, I opened all the windows to let the smell out, took a big breath of fresh air from outside, and went back to wash the bottle from the inside out. Contents aside, the bottle was still pretty. I was sure that the silver decorating its neck would be worth something if I took it to a pawn shop. I told my girlfriend when the coast was clear. We set the now empty cabinet on the kitchen counter. We put our own bottle of wine in it and left it there. We spent the next day out furniture shopping again. When we got back and finished unloading all the stuff we bought, we were tired. My girlfriend suggested that I pop open the bottle of wine we put in the cabinet last night. The moment we popped open the bottle, the same rancid smell from the day before returned with a vengeance. Somehow, the wine in our relatively new, unopened bottle had become rotten, just like the wine we found in the cabinet. I emptied the bottle in the sink, and just like the bottle from the day before, the wine had been turned into some sort of viscous black liquid. Once the smell dissipated, my girlfriend and I sat down and talked about what happened. We came to the conclusion that it was the cabinet that caused our wine to go bad, as strange as that would seem. Still, it was a nice-looking cabinet and could probably fetch a decent price, so we decided to post it for sale online to make a quick buck. Maybe that's selfish of us, but we needed the money and doubted that anyone would be stupid enough to drink wine soured by the cabinet with how terrible it smells anyway. We both woke up the next day to the same rancid smell of cat urine and rotten fruit. The moment the smell hit our nostrils, we ran out of the apartment and into the hallway, only to find it permeated with the same god-awful stench. Most of our neighbors were outside their apartments as well. They all looked like they were about to throw up. A crowd was gathered at the receptionist desk, complaining about the smell. I overheard one of the neighbors say something about the water turning black. I rushed back to my apartment, pinching my nose, and opened the kitchen sink tap. Sure enough, rancid black liquid came flowing out. In our panic, my girlfriend and I rode into the city with the cabinet in our trunk. We went to the pawn shop on the other side of the city and sold it for barely any more than we bought it for. Even the shopkeeper seemed surprised with how quickly we agreed to his offer, but didn't ask any questions. The water in the apartment continued to be black and rancid for the next couple days before returning to normal. The police came to investigate the black substance at one point, fearing a mass poisoning incident. I only heard news of the police lab report long after the black water had disappeared. According to them, traces of human blood and liquefied organs were found within the black substance. Investigations were ongoing, but the leading theory is that a sewer worker must have died on the job, and his remains somehow found its way into the water system. I know better though. To this day, I regret not destroying the cabinet when I had the chance. The pawn shop owner told me that he'd already sold it when I went to buy it back. If I ever come across it again, I'll burn it once and for all. Maybe then, whatever restless spirit that resides inside it can finally rest.
Hey guys, I see many of you commenting on my videos that this channel deserves 1 million subscribers. But I also see the percent of people who watch my videos aren't actually subscribed to the channel. So, if you like the content, want to support my channel, and want to see this channel reach 1 million subscribers, or maybe 500,000 subscribers, then go ahead, subscribe, and hit the bell icon. It's free, and you can always change your mind later.
I was always close to my little sister, Sarah. Our mother was always busy with work, and our father left us when we were young, so it was mostly up to me to raise her. She's 4 years younger than me, and this story happened when I was 18, and she was 14. My mother had just gotten remarried to a guy named Ben, who seemed nice enough to me. I didn't really mind him. He was rich enough to help my mother support us, and he always treated my mother with respect, so I was okay with her dating him. Sarah didn't feel the same way about him though. She avoided eye contact with Ben at the dinner table every night, and never spoke to him unless he spoke to her first. She'd even avoid walking past the living room to get snacks if he was on the couch watching TV there. I had to be the one to go get stuff for her downstairs on several occasions. I chalked it up to her not being comfortable around someone she didn't know, and assumed that she'll get used to him being around eventually. On her 14th birthday, Ben decided to win her heart over by bringing her to the shopping mall to pick out any gift she'd like. I thought she'd be ecstatic at the idea, but she outright refused to go outside with him unless I went with them. Ben joked that she must have really loved her older brother and said that he'd let me pick out something too if I came. So, of course, I went with them. We strolled through the local mall looking at clothes, purses, and a bunch of other stereotypical girly stuff that Ben thought Sarah would like. She didn't like any of them. Sarah was pretty short for her age and looked far younger than she actually was, too, so almost none of the clothes she tried on even fit her. Meanwhile, I was just tagging along, waiting for us to walk into a section of the mall that sells stuff geared towards teenage boys. Eventually, we came across a little antique shop nestled in a quiet corner of the mall. I was getting really bored and tired of walking around, so I pointed it out to Ben and Sarah, hoping that I'd be able to sit down and check my phone inside. Ben said he didn't think there'd be anything a little girl like Sarah would like inside there, but Sarah insisted that they check it out, since I suggested it. The three of us entered the antique shop, and I immediately gravitated towards the sports section, where a bunch of vintage sports paraphernalia were on sale. Sarah wandered the shop with Ben, watching over her from the entrance of the little shop. Eventually, she stopped walking, and I looked up from a signed baseball card of a famous player to look at what got her attention. She was staring at a fancy glass display cabinet containing a variety of knickknacks that looked decades old at the very least. There were some silver plates, a fine china tea set, and something that looked like an old gas lamp. But the star of the display was an antique doll that sat at the very top row of the cabinet. The doll was dressed like a noble lady going to a funeral, with a long black dress, black gloves, and a translucent black veil over its face. The pitch-black clothes made the pale white porcelain of its face behind the veil all that more pronounced. When Sarah picked it out of the cabinet and lifted the veil from its face, it revealed a sorrowful frown, accompanied by large blue eyes that seemed to bore into my soul, even from a distance. I told Sarah that that was one dour-looking doll she's holding there. To my surprise, she told me that she thinks she wanted to buy the doll. I asked her why on earth would she want a depressed-looking thing in her room. She said that she couldn't quite explain why she liked it. Something about the doll just resonated with her, according to her, anyways. Sarah was always weird like that. I thought she was a little too old to still be playing with dolls, but I kept that to myself and let her ask Ben to buy it for her. The moment the old shopkeeper saw the doll she was holding, she told her that she could have it for free. Apparently, she'd been trying to get rid of it for years, but people kept returning it because of the sad vibe it gave off. She seemed glad that such a beautiful doll might finally find a permanent home by someone who didn't mind the way it looked. Since we got the doll for free, Ben allowed Sarah to pick out another thing from the store for her birthday. She ended up buying a much less depressing-looking navy blue dress that the store owner said could fit on her new doll, which she decided to name Sally. As for me, I got a wooden baseball bat that had been autographed by a famous old player to brag to my friends about. Later that night, I was awoken by the sound of crying. I'm normally a pretty heavy sleeper. Almost nothing can wake me up once my head hits the pillow. But the crying sound wasn't normal. It didn't feel like I was hearing it through my ears. More like the sound was being directly projected into my brain. I had no idea how that's even possible, but decided to ignore it for the time being, and asked Sarah about it the next day. When the morning came, I asked Sarah at the breakfast table if she was crying last night. Ben was already out for work that morning, so she was a lot more talkative than she would have been otherwise. She seemed surprised by my question, but insisted that she didn't make a sound the night before. She asked if I was feeling well, and I shrugged the entire incident off. It was probably just a dream anyways. With Ben around to hog the TV, Sarah decided to spend that morning on the couch watching her favorite shows on the big screen. I went back up to my room with the intention of gaming on my PC all day. On my way to the bedroom, I saw Sarah's bedroom door wide open. I assumed that she had just forgotten to close it and went to shut it for her so that no bugs would get in. As I did, I caught a glimpse of Sally sitting on Sarah's nightstand with her veil lifted up. It looked like red tears were streaming from her blue eyes, staining her porcelain cheek. I was taken aback by it and slammed the door shut before going to my room. I reasoned that it was probably just my eyes playing tricks on me, or Sarah trying to put makeup on the doll, and tried my best to forget about it. That night, I woke up to the sound of crying again, but something was different this time. This time, I could also feel the weight of something on the bed with me. My eyes flew open, and I looked down to see Sally sitting at the foot of my bed, her blue eyes still crying tears of blood, with a mournful frown. I push-kicked her out of my bed on instinct. She fell off my bed, but instead of the sound of shattering porcelain, I heard a loud thud, followed by the currying of tiny feet, leading out of my open bedroom door. I grabbed the baseball bat Ben bought me and bolted out of my bedroom door. I was just in time to see the skirt of Sally's black dress disappear behind the slightly cracked open door of Sarah's bedroom. I threw Sarah's bedroom door open, baseball bat in hand, and intending to shatter the little doll into a million pieces. Instead, I was met with a sight that will haunt and shame me for the rest of my life. Ben was in Sarah's bedroom, sitting right in bed with her, touching her in ways I don't even want to remember. Ben's eyes widened in surprise when he saw me, and my eyes saw red when I saw what he'd been doing to my sister without me knowing. The autograph on the baseball bat was hardly legible underneath the bloodstains after I beat the living shit out of Ben with it. When my mother heard the commotion and came to our bedroom to ask what was going on, Sarah broke down in tears, and I helped explain what happened. She called the police and ambulance, though not before helping me beat the shit out of Ben even more. In the end, I wasn't charged for any crimes. As for Ben, he's behind bars now, far away from my family. Sarah still keeps Sally around, and I've learned to tolerate the occasional sound of scurrying feet in the night. A couple of things are different about her now, though. These days, Sarah has her wear the blue dress more often than her black one, and instead of a sorrowful frown, Sally now has a content smile on her porcelain face. My father suddenly passed away shortly after I graduated college. According to the police, he died from a boating accident on the lake behind his house. He left me the house in his will, and I decided to move back in after the funeral. I'd planned on getting my own apartment after graduation, but I just couldn't let my old childhood home just sit there forgotten and abandoned. The moment I arrived at the house, I immediately noticed all the redecorating that it must have gone through in my absence. The photos on the walls that used to be of my mother were replaced with photos of the woman my father married after her untimely death. I never did like her. She always seemed too full of herself and thought she deserved everything my father had to give. What he saw in her, I'll never know. I decided to take down every photo of her from the walls of the house. If I had to guess, she probably insisted that all the photos decorating the house be of her, and occasionally her cat. I silently thanked my father for leaving the entire house to me, instead of forcing me to split it with her. I just wish she had the decency of cleaning up the house before the court kicked her out of it. The entire place was in disarray. Claw marks marred the walls, presumably from my stepmother's cat, and several pieces of furniture were tipped over or damaged. My stepmother probably caused the mess in a temper tantrum after learning that my father didn't leave her the house in his will. I spent the entire first day back in my childhood home cleaning up her mess. That evening, I opened the door to a room that used to be a guest bedroom and was surprised to find it turned into a miniature homemade art studio. There were racks still lined with tubes of paint and several paintings lining the walls. I knew my father had taken up painting in recent years, but I didn't know just how good he'd gotten at it until I saw his art studio. Most of it was landscape paintings featuring familiar-looking scenery. A lot of them were of the nearby forest, the local park, or even neighboring homes. But the indisputable star of the entire collection was the one that hadn't been framed yet. It was a gorgeous painting of the house from the back that included the enormous lake that my father had died in. Floating on the lake in the distance, too far to clearly make out, was the very same blue boat that my father was on when it capsized and killed him. I felt sad seeing it, both because it reminded me of my father's death and because it was proof of his incredible artistry that never got the chance to shine when he was alive. I decided to frame the painting and put it up in my room to remind me of my father and the talent he discovered far too late in his life. I fell asleep that night while staring at the blue waters of the lake and my father's painting. I kept thinking about what I'd call the painting, and before I knew it, it was the next day and I had to go to work. Before I left, I decided to officially christen the painting with a name I made up somewhere in my dreams: the Sapphire Lake. When I returned home after a long day at work, I headed straight for my bedroom for a quick nap. But just as I was about to rest my weary eyes, I noticed something off about the painting. I could have sworn that the boat that had been barely distinguishable the day before had gotten bigger. I ultimately brushed it off and just took my much-needed nap. When I woke up, I opened my eyes to find that the painting had changed yet again. This time, the blue boat was already halfway to the shore of the lake, and two human figures could be clearly made out on it. One of them was my father, and the other was my stepmother, leering at him behind his back. I thought that I must have been going mad, and went downstairs to get myself a drink. The stress and grief must have been getting to me, I thought. I concluded that I may have to take a couple days off work for the sake of my mental health. I called my boss to tell him that I'd be absent the next day. He was understanding and said that I can take all the time I needed to mourn. That night, I dreamed of what I'd do the next day to relax. When I woke up, I saw that the painting had changed yet again. All thoughts of relaxation left my mind when I noticed what had changed in it. My father was in the middle of walking out of the lakeshore. My stepmother stood behind him, the red oar of the boat gripped tightly in both hands and raised high above her head. I realized with horror what she intended to do with it. I rubbed my eyes trying to convince myself that I was seeing things, but when I looked back at the painting, it had changed yet again. My father was lying dead on the shallow lakeshore, his head cracked open and bloody. Behind him was my stepmother holding the oar, dripping with blood that was almost impossible to make out against the red paint. I immediately ran out of my room and towards the lake behind the house. The blue boat was still there, as were both of its red oars, one of which had a barely noticeable faint red stain on the flat of its blade. I called the police and asked them to come over to investigate. Once I pointed out the stain to them, the investigation on my father's death reopened. My stepmother was arrested shortly after. She admitted in interrogation that she had killed my father in the hopes of inheriting his house and money. In prison, she would have neither. I still live in my childhood home, and the Sapphire Lake still hangs on my bedroom wall. It no longer changes though. Now, only the figure of my father is visible, smiling gently at me.